Payton Kane has been a resident of downtown San Antonio for over 12 years. With a love of the past, he fancies himself an amateur genealogist, enthusiastic Democrat, and a passionate gin martini drinker with an unhealthy obsession with, wait for it, Dionne Warwick. Payton divides his time between here and down the street. I present to you, Payton Kane.
Thank you, Gary.
Four more years. So, anyone who knows me knows this is going to be very difficult. You have all heard way more than 6 minutes and 40 seconds out of me tonight, and you're going to have to hear 6 minutes and 40 seconds more. And well, I mean, you don't have to. The door's right there. But anyway, but I would just say that I do thank PechaKucha for giving me this honor and setting a precedent by making me the first person to host and speak. Undoubtedly, it will be, but it is bound to be a precedent that this time the Supreme Court will probably rightfully strike down because, you know, it's just too much, right? Just me. Anyway, so here we go. D-O-D-S-O-N, Dotson, we will win. You know, when I was growing up in Dotson, Texas, population 109, we didn't have a team. We didn't even have a school, but we did have a cheer. The school closed back in 1969, and Dotson, in the southeastern corner of the Panhandle, still managed to give me a good education. This is my dad, Steve. He's a farmer and a rancher. He's also been the mayor of Dotson for over 20 years. And being the mayor of a tiny town is a thankless job. Dad gets to drive around shutting dumpster lids and has lots of opportunities to practice our cheer. And our first lady, my mother, is rather modest, and she'd kill me if I showed you a photo. But also being my mother's a thankless job. Dotson is not like growing up in Mayberry. It's more like growing up in Hooterville. The folks are quirkier and more industrious. This is from an episode called Old Mail Day, where they cleaned out the post office and returned everybody's old mail. Dotson doesn't have a post office anymore. So here's a typical scene from the Dotson Cafe. Nellie ran the cafe for about 45 years, and she's here with Thurman, Howard, Arnis, and Cousin Grover. Once a man was coming through town and asked Cousin Grover how much it rained, and when Cousin Grover told him 21 inches, the man responded, "Well, that's not that much." Cousin Grover said, "Well, you ought to be here on the day we get it." This is my dear friend Myrtle Yarbrough, pictured in the middle, with her two daughters. Myrtle died in 2007, just shy of her 102nd birthday. She was born just across the line in Oklahoma when it was still Indian territory. I used to go to visit her several days a week after school, and we never ran out of things to talk about. And she taught me that friendship has no age limit. My cousin Walter Camp, he was my grandmother's double cousin, and he told the best stories. He had a lilting drawl with a mind like a steel trap. His wife told him when he was into his 80s that he should start taking ginkgo for his memory. So one day he popped a couple supplements and he went out to feed the cows. He said he hadn't gotten 5 miles down the road before he could remember the Alamo. Wilma and Wanda were my grandmother's twin cousins, and they were lifelong Democrats and redheads. And once before a funeral, a man approached Wanda, and he said, "Wanda, it's so good to see you. Oh, you just look so great." And after the man walked away, she turned to her sister and said, "Who on earth was that?" And Wilma said, "Well, you ought to know he was your first husband." One Sunday morning, I was watering some plants downtown when I was back home, and Wilma pulled up in her car, and she got out, and she took the hose from me, and at that moment, I noticed that she tucked her skirt into her pantyhose. I couldn't bring myself to tell her because I was really embarrassed, and finally, before she hopped in the car to go to Sunday school, I said, "Wilma, your skirt's in your pantyhose," and she said, "Oh, baby, I do that all the time. Thank you for letting me know." These are my two best friends, my grandparents, sitting on their back porch with their dog Sally, just a mile south of Dotson. My granddad was from Michigan, and during World War II, he was stationed with my grandmother's cousin in Okinawa. He started writing my grandmother letters, and then he ended up in Texas, so always take a chance. Grandmother taught me to never be afraid to apologize or admit that you were wrong. Once we were having a conversation, and she said, "I just don't understand why people can't lose weight the old-fashioned way." And I said, "Well, grandmother, maybe you just don't understand that because you've never been big." She responded, "Well, I'll have you know, one time I weighed 125 pounds. She was pregnant with my dad at the time. Make all kinds of friends. This is my grandmother's quilting circle. All kinds of women there. The woman in the far right corner was a neighbor. They shared a party line. She always made the grocer cut off the stems of the bananas before he weighed them. It makes sense to me, but I grew up in Dodson. These are two of my favorites, Dennis and Judy. They're forever friends with connections that go back to my family for generations. Judy was my high school Spanish teacher, now my best friend, and she taught me that you deserve to be loved and appreciated for who you are. Love me, love my duck, as she would say. Dennis, her husband, always said that everyone's good for something, even if for a bad example. Here are my two grandfathers, Art and Earl. They're two very different personalities from two different sides of the county, but they still had the same sense of duty and commitment to their family, to their jobs, and to their country. They both served in the military, and they were hilarious, and they would give you the shirt off of their backs, even if you didn't deserve it. Here's a picture I took a few months ago of my mama in the middle and my great aunt Genevieve. Those are my two nieces on the side. Mama and Genevieve are sister-in-laws. They are classmates. They graduated from 1954 in Wellington High School, and they still keep each other going. And they taught me that you just go and go and go and never stop, and that keeps you young. After grandmother died, granddad kind of slowed down a lot, and things got a little simpler for him. And I can just picture him here in this photo saying, you know, boy, sometimes all you need are a cup of coffee, some bean dip, and some scoops. You ever tried them scoops? They're pretty good. I got an extra bag in there if you want to take them home with you. And you know, it's never too late to make an old friend. This is my grandmother's twin sister, my Aunt Odessa, and my grandfather. They had been in-laws for 67 years and had never really known each other until after my grandmother died. And the loss of my grandmother brought them together, and they shared and they bonded in a way that kept my grandfather alive for another 6 years. Speaking of keeping on, here's Aunt Odessa. She's almost 98, and she's still rocking and rolling. She's as smart and sassy as she ever was. And I think if you try to maintain those friendships and form new ones, you'll always have somebody to share your memories with. And some happy, some sad, and a lot agreeing and disagreeing, but mostly laughing. Laughter is truly the best medicine. And there's something that spans generations, bridges divides, and connects hearts in laughing. Now, I didn't grow up with this next lady, but you knew you weren't going to get through an entire slide without seeing her. Dion grew up with me, though. Or I grew up with her. She didn't grow up with me. I think her music colored my childhood and still colors my life. And Dion always said the best advice that anybody ever gave her is probably the best advice I've ever heard is, you can't be anybody but you, so you be you. Well, that's a little bit from my part of the world. Growing up in a place like Dodson, surrounded by strong, quirky, industrious people, gives you a lot of strength. It gives you strength to go out and live in a big city, or it gives you strength to go out and seek that sense of community. And that's what I found here in San Antonio. And I thank San Antonio for being my second hometown. Thank you for listening to my News from Lake Wobegon, my St. Olaf story. And from now on, you'll be able to answer that question for yourself when you ask, what the hell's wrong with that guy?
Bless your heart. Is this on? Is this on? Nope. On? Can you hear me?
Yeah?
Are there any questions from you guys? Because I'm kind of, that's a screenplay, you know.
Is it? I don't know. A really
need to
sad
write that
one,
down. But, okay, so be honest, Payton. Wasn't there a lot of time when you just wanted to get out of there?
Of course.
I mean, I'm trying to picture the basic fish out of water story here.
But, I mean, I kind of think if you don't know where to go, you don't really know that you're supposed to leave.
But wait, you
right?
had televisions and stuff. I mean, you must
well, I think so. We had four,
wait,
I will say we had 4 channels.
What was the nearest big city?
Amarillo, and that was 120 miles.
That doesn't count. I mean, okay. Well, anyway, yeah, I got nothing. That was just spectacular. But I do have a pop quiz for you, and we'll end on this. Okay, you ready? Lightning round. Okay. What's your favorite place to drink?
Yes.
If you could be a superhero, what power would you possess?
Time travel.
What's your favorite Castro twin?
Fidel.
Favorite loop? 410 or 1604?
I like the one in between, 10:07.
If you could freeze yourself for 1 year of your life, what age would you be?
I peaked at 5.5.
5.5, you peaked.
Good.
Would you rather fight a horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
Oh, I guess I would have to say 100 duck-sized horses.
You're on a desert
I mean,
island.
that large of a webbed foot. I mean,
You're on a desert island. You have only 3 foods. What are they?
Okay, lemon rind, real maraschino cherry, and an olive, all garnishes.
Okay, if you were a brand, what would be your motto?
Oh, if I was a brand, Lincoln Mercury leads the way. I don't know.
Who would play you in a movie about your life?
Oh, okay. Let's see. It's a toss-up between Robert Blake and Shelley Winters.
And we're going to end on that. Hey, thank you very much for showing up.